Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Blanchard, the Public Sector Director for GovNews Direct, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's Local Government Masterclass, how to deliver economic, social and environmental priorities throughout your digital transformation journey. Today's event, in partnership with Bytes and Microsoft, follows our recent white paper, Device as a Service, Local Government's Journey to ESG, Delivering Value and Smarter Working. And within this paper, we explored how Device as a Service can be used to reduce digital poverty in local authorities and reduce your carbon footprint. It focused on the sustainability of procuring technology at scale in public services and how modern workplace solutions can be implemented throughout the local authority sector, and an exploration of the benefits of partnering with an accredited Device as a Service partner and provider like Bytes to instill organizational change. So by joining today, we've sent you a copy of this white paper. Hopefully you've received that. And we invite you to review when focusing on your own sustainability and the transformational power of digital technologies. But today we've got a very exciting agenda to bring you. Before we start, I'm just going to go over some quick housekeeping. So all attendees are on listen-only mode, but that shouldn't stop you from interacting and taking part in this session. You can hopefully see, you can hopefully see and hear me right now, but you should be able to see a chat function. I can see many of you saying good morning, which is great. Hello. That's your opportunity in that area to post comments and questions. And we've got time later on in the agenda to review and hopefully try and answer some of those that you've sent across. We're going to be recording today's full session, so a copy of the masterclass will be sent to you afterwards with any presentation slides that we have as well. Finally, we hope today's learning exchange provides you with some insight into the opportunities that are available at your own council, wherever that might be across the UK. So for the next 90 minutes, here's what we've got coming up. We've got an opening keynote from Dr. Martin Reeves. Martin is the Chief Executive of Oxfordshire County Council and the National Procurement Champion for the LGA. I'll be bringing Martin onto the stage shortly. Following that, we have a presentation from Andy Kennell, the Service Director for ICT at Somerset Council. Andy will be sharing the council's own Device as a Service journey. After we've heard from Andy, I'll then be opening and facilitating our panelist discussion with a group of industry experts, including Georgina Marathetis. Georgina's the Associate Director for Local Public Services at Tech UK. We've got Richard Reed, Head of Public Sector at Bytes, and Richard's colleague, Dan Crayenbrink, who's the Services Commercial Director at Bytes. We have Gareth Kosker and Nimesh Patel, both from the Modern Workplace Surface team at Microsoft. And joining us from Andy's team at Somerset, we've got Jack Bly, who is the subject matter expert at the council for ICT hardware and software assets. And as part of the panel discussion, like I said, we'll be covering some of your questions and comments, as hopefully you'll be posting many. So keep them coming through. And if that wasn't enough, I'll be delighted at the end of the session to invite the procurement and social value expert, Richard Dooner. Richard is a program manager and the lead at the WLGA. Richard's going to kindly provide us with our session's closing keynote. So a very busy session indeed. We've got lots to cover. So without delay, I'm now going to bring to the stage Dr. Martin Reeves, Chief Executive of Oxfordshire County Council and the National Procurement Champion for the LGA, for our opening keynote. So Martin, great to have you with us, and over to you.
So thanks, Mark. Really appreciate that introduction, and really pleased to be able to spend a few minutes talking about the importance of this session today as you get into discussion, including some of the case studies from Somerset. And I thought what might be quite useful in terms of setting that scene for us all is to do three things. Firstly, just talk a little bit about my take on the context in which we're operating at the moment, particularly with regards to the macro politics, social, environmental and economic financial positions, because that drives everything that we do within our places and within public service. Then say a bit about social value and the power of market making and procurement. And I'll do that with my local government association, National Procurement Champion hat on. And then thirdly, talk about digital and the power of transformation through digital as an enabler, and hopefully link those three things together. So I'll speak for probably 10 minutes max, just giving you hopefully some food for thought. And as I say, a framework under which hopefully the case studies and understanding the great work that's happening across local government, public service in our places sits within. So first of all then, the context. And I think we have to agree, don't we, that the macro context has never been more challenging, shifting a greater pace than arguably ever before. And I know words like unprecedented are used quite a lot, but the truth is, if you think about geopolitical changes across the globe, if you think about some of the unprecedented, and they really are unprecedented, climate impacts, which we see displacement of people from their own countries seeking refuge elsewhere, and significant natural disasters as a result, right back to the impacts at home with the energy crisis, cost of living challenges as well that a number of our communities are still facing. And obviously, as we came out of the pandemic, major shifts with regards to where we work from, how we work, the way in which we associate with each other, the economies changing radically as a result of what we've been through. So I think it's fair to say, in terms of that overall context in which we're operating, it is febrile. It creates major challenges and tensions within our communities, within politics, media, and I would argue particularly social media tends to polarize some of those necessary discussions within that, as we try and find together ways of delivering what are some really big opportunities, actually, as we think about these shifting sands at probably a higher pace than we've seen. And we're all in that, and we're in that kind of sense of trying to, as leaders, make sense of that as best we can, to grab the value that is there. And I would argue, particularly for local government, on behalf of those people that we serve, because that is the only reason we exist, is to improve the economic, social, environmental, health, well-being of the people in our places, and particularly those that are most vulnerable. So it's a heavy responsibility, because one, I think that context drives a lot of our thinking, or at least it should, as we move forward. So context is absolutely everything. And you have a view about whether I've over-egged that or not, but I would urge you all to always look out and horizon scan, because from a global macro level, and the trends and the impacts, right the way down to a hyper-local level, we're seeing people, communities, trying to make sense of all of this in ways that we've probably not had to, I would argue, certainly in the recent past. So secondly then, social value. And I say this now with a lot of work that's been done ever since the Social Value Act and the legislation. The changes obviously as a result of Brexit and the European framework within that, and some changes obviously from our own government as how we might think about the legal framework in which procurement commissioning is done. But I want to particularly focus on the power of how, using not just the existing legislation, but using our broader duties and well-beings as local authorities, that we can really, what I say to everybody is, follow the notion of social value everywhere. This is well beyond just processes, as important as they are, to ensure within all of our contracts, our commission outcomes, we've got a really strong weighting for social value. Whether that be ways in which locally we wish to think about employment for those that really are resident in our areas and within our catchment, and particularly those, for example, that have got non-traditional pathways, and well beyond the tick boxes of just apprenticeships, just a few of them, but actually really follow it everywhere, an endemic shift to workforces and how we use them. Or if we want to really think about local supply chain, because of our green footprint, but also because of the kind of following the pound everywhere in our place, to make sure that we're adding absolutely that massive value into small, medium, as well as large organisations that sit, again, within our own places. Is absolutely legitimate to do that, to evaluate it really strongly, weight it strongly within all of our processes, and above all, to make sure that this is not just part of a tender or relet process, but as we think about how we make new markets, how we make our existing markets even stronger and add even better value with the commercial sector, with the community and voluntary sector and the hybrid. We actually have very early conversations about what that could look like. Because my view, and I think this is something that has changed radically over the last 5 years, probably because of the context that I said. If you think about it, a lot of our organisations across sector, irrespective of their size, are now being driven by ESG and those goals at shareholder level, board level, but right the way through their workforces are calling them out to say we must make sure not only do we say we're going to be sustainable, environmental consciousness and delivery is going to be through everything that we do, but actually we're going to call you out if you don't do that. So actually it's a much more of an open door than it's been before, in my view. So those conversations, I would urge everyone to be really proactive, brave and bold in those conversations. Because if you think about it, even though in the context I talked about, economically and financially, local government and public services have seen a decade, really and a half of tough budget reductions, as we say, tough external financial circumstances, but demand has gone up still significantly high and complex demand on our services, we still remain, both in capital terms, but also in revenue terms, massive players in all kinds of energy sector markets, highways markets, social care markets, children's social care as well as adults in that sense, the health integration markets, as well as a raft of other place-based initiatives that require capitalisation and revenue. So we are multi-billion pound spenders across the UK. So if you think if we were just together as a sector to be able to reimagine 2, 3, 4, 5% of that spend in a fundamentally different way, where we're really focused on social value and how we can, what I call, shift the dial on inequalities and deliver something for what is not only the outcomes that we require through that procurement, that commissioning, but actually got a lot of other tangible benefits as well by doing that. So none of us underestimate the power of what we have as place shapers, place makers, but also market makers. And I would urge us all, as I say, to really think carefully and seriously about that and to innovate and disrupt in that, because the challenges are so high, the opportunities are so big about changing products, changing marketplaces. And the final bit I'll say before I finish with digital and how transformation can fit into all of this is the need to really think as well, with all of that, about rapidly changing products, services, which I'll touch on in a moment, which means that we must keep our data, our analysis at the heart of our trend analysis and understanding what it is that's going on out there, what it is that our consumers really and our residents and our patients and our users really need from us, because it is such a radically changing landscape. And above all, though, to procure, to commission for a set of outcomes that really are clear, they're deliverable, and they do, as I say, shift the dial rather than just tick those boxes. I know it's hard, I get that, but there's good examples across the country of how we're doing that. We must disseminate and learn together really quickly if we're going to be able to do this in a more scaled up way going forward. So I've talked about the context we're operating, which drives everything, the focus that's required on social value. Let me just finish for a few minutes on digital transformation and transformation more broadly. There's absolutely no doubt, as we see the power of machine learning, artificial intelligence, but actually digital much more broadly, on the power of connectivity and linking people, as I said, in a changing context to each other in fundamentally different ways, using 5G, in terms of using other technological platforms to make us more productive, more efficient at connecting ourselves to each other, ourselves to other businesses, other partners, but also to think about how new businesses are formed and how people now live their lives, whether it be leisure, business, where they live, how they travel, is all now being defined by probably one of the most rapidly shifting technological advances since the Industrial Revolution. So, how does that link to market making, social value? Well, my urge for all of you, as you discussed today some great case study examples, is that the technology, the platforms, the kit, if you like, is here. And that which is not here will be emerging very rapidly. That's not the issue. It will become lower cost, higher value in terms of what outcomes we want from it over a very short space of time. But this is the point. I'd urge you all, again, in terms of this masterclass and any of your thinking, how do we always start with the following? What problem are we trying to solve? What transformation are we genuinely trying to not just create but sustain for our organisations, for our places? And if, for example, there's a series of exam questions we wish to pose around productivity of the organisation, efficiency, tools to be able to do that, yeah, sure, let's make them. Let's work with the market to deliver that at the best value possible. But only answer that question in light of what we're here for, which is to deliver even better quality of opportunity and amazing new transformed lives from people that we serve in our communities. And with that, you don't end up being driven by, if I'm be honest, vendors purely and product, as critical as that is for high quality responsiveness in the market, but you're driven by the opportunities to start somewhere and follow it everywhere. Think about what's happening now, as I say, with AI and others. And yes, the ethical dilemmas and the challenges of that, but the opportunity for us to radically redesign our services through the eyes of the people that live and work and play in our areas. So I'd just say finally that yes, understand the context, make sure we're driving that social value. We're around digital, ICT, and next generation platforms. Make sure that we're answering those questions first. Spend the time really rigorously pulling those apart before we then enter a process of what the market can provide with us and for us. And I think if we do that, we'll deliver the kind of outcomes we want. So I really hope some of that has stimulated some thinking. We need to be bold, disruptive together, and we need to learn rapidly as a sector with our partners and not fear that, but use it as an opportunity to dynamically become even better at delivering value through procurement commissioning. And I would argue particularly some of those new products and services that are starting to emerge in the markets now. So back to you, Mark, and I hope that the rest of the session goes really well. Thank you.
Fantastic opening to today's session. Thank you for setting the scene. Next up, we have Andy Kennell, Service Director for ICT at Somerset Council. So I'm going to bring Andy to the stage. Morning, Andy.
Thanks, Mark. Hello, everyone. As Mark said, I'm the new Service Director for the new Somerset Council, which arrived on the 1st of April. So this is kind of, I'm going to be taking you through our journey, which was back with Somerset County Council, but obviously it's a solution that would have scaled to the bigger Somerset Council if we'd had that opportunity. So what I plan to take you through is kind of going through what we did last time, some of the reasons and drivers for why I wanted to make a change, what we achieved, and then some kind of key aspects around savings, the environment, the technology we used, and how we've kind of delivered some social value, followed by a short video that Mark and his team produced for us on this project as a whole. So first up, where did we come from? Back in 2018, we delivered a kind of device rollout for introducing Windows 10 to our workforce, and it was more of a traditional public sector procurement. We had a hardware reseller. We went to the market looking for a set stock of devices of 3 or 4 different types, and we went with the lowest price that kind of met those requirements. We then set up a large project team, 20 people, who we then were engaged with, creating that environment. So creating a golden image, adding that to all those devices. So a lot of upfront work, and then engaging with our 3,000 odd staff members to get them a new device and bring the old device back. That happened over 4 main offices and some of our libraries, so involved an awful lot of travelling around, an awful lot of people travelling to those sites, because Somerset is a large rural county, so our sites weren't necessarily near to their home, so we added to the impact of making people travel. And obviously the whole thing itself would take 4 to 5 hours to first set up their device, add the software specific to them, and then take them through that new environment that was Windows 10. So around about 2019, 2020, I started to think about how we could do that differently. That it was, like I said, a traditional way of doing things, and I thought we could do a lot better. A first inkling I had of that was a kind of tech summit with Microsoft, where I saw the demo of what Autopilot could do, and I thought that was a step changing kind of technology in the way that we could deliver devices straight to our staff members in their homes, with the security of BitLocker and having a Windows password that was ours, but also kind of reduced the overall size of that team. So some of the other aspects I was looking for is how did we get a better result out of the old kit. In the previous project, we kind of effectively sold our old kit and then got some recycled kit back that probably wasn't much better than what we ended up with. So we ended up kind of losing out on that, and we did give that to some care leavers and some of the local volunteer groups, but it wasn't really thought through. It's kind of like the end of the project. We thought about it and kind of got it together. So for this project, it was really thinking about that up front and making sure that when we bought our laptops, we also had that ability to kind of reuse them at the end of when they became, end of life for us, as it were, because they still had some kind of value elsewhere. We then went through the process of looking at how do we set up Autopilot. We had engagements with both Bytes and Microsoft around funding to help with the white glove or process that would set up the environment for us at source, so it could be shipped to our staff members pre-provisioned. That took a while, and then COVID hit, so we kind of had a bit of a hiatus where we sort of knew what we wanted to do, but couldn't deliver it because of lockdown, and that kind of changed the environment as well, because part of lockdown, everyone at home had a screen. So whereas before we thought maybe the Surface Laptop Go was a cheap price point for a laptop, but wouldn't be suitable for everyone, we now had an environment where there was a big screen at home, both and in the office when people got back to it. So there was that opportunity to shift to a smaller and what people thought was a more mobile solution because of that now shift between hybrid working, which wasn't in place when we started the project. It also added to that the financial savings, because getting a replacement laptop all in for sub £700 was a good result from this project, and something we hadn't done on the previous one. And obviously at that stage, things like social value and the climate emergency were starting to be thought about in more detail when we did procurement, and obviously that was built into that overall project theory, in that if we could actually remove one visit from getting a laptop and also save on the journey time, that would also reduce that impact. The sticking point was, how do we get the laptops back? Because obviously we couldn't take them back immediately, and one of the solutions was to use a courier, which was around £10 per device to get it back, which we didn't want to do. So a member of the project team came up with the theory of offering to drop sites across the county. We have libraries, we have hubs, we have various other branch offices that we use to give people a local drop point, rather than have to drive all the way to County Hall from parts of Somerset that are a long way away. So again, that was something that we were looking at to try and do that. The other thing that we did, because of COVID, there were supply issues. We couldn't buy all the devices at once, which we had done previously, and what that opened up to us was the fact that large laptop manufacturers, Microsoft and the others, do various deals around different timeframes. So you could have Black Friday deals, you could have when a new version is released, that there is stock of the old version that you can pick up cheaper, and this project really did make advantage of that. I think we had 2 Black Fridays in this that we picked up on, plus end of life early on for some of the Surface devices. So yes, we were using some of the older stock, but it did give us that advantage of buying things in stages and not having to make the choice of what device we want up front and the numbers. So as the project moved on, we got a better feel for the mix of laptop goes to normal laptops to tablets. So in the end, that was a good way of actually controlling the budget and making sure we got the right device for the right member of staff. I spoke about earlier about the end of life of our old kit. Part of the procurement was to utilize a recycling company, which was Blackmore, and they would take our kit away and effectively give us credits. Now that could have been for monetary gain, but what we wanted to do was get those devices back and start to use them for care leavers. Obviously, in this time, you had the Ukrainian war and some of the refugees coming over, so we used some of those devices for them, and there were various local causes that are really needed small numbers of devices, 3, 4, 5 devices that we could make available to help with how they were running their kind of small businesses or what they were doing with volunteers. As I said previously, there's some numbers there around. We sent 2,200 devices out to home addresses, and then 500 were kind of returned to local sites. So again, that was how we got that reduction in impact on the environment. That's the next slide now. So these are some of the savings we got from this project. So obviously, the big number is on resources, going down from 20 to 3 for a project team was a big saving, and and I think what the other kind of side effect of that was that project team really grew. These weren't senior people that we're having to employ. These were people that were growing as part of our apprenticeship scheme or various other things. So it was another social value in that we were growing local people to kind of get this experience of a big project. Third party promotions, that's another area. Again, that's kind of alluding back to what I was saying around buying things in small batches. We could get discounts on some of the products. We also had funding from Microsoft to pay for that white glove, which was taking it from the base build to something that would arrive to our staff's houses with something that they could get going on straight away once they'd downloaded their specific software. Downtime was a lot less. These are estimates. Obviously, the mileage costs are based around the difference between them coming into County Hall versus them going to a local site for their library to drop off their device, and the energy saving is around the difference between the more efficient use of a newer device versus the legacy ones that we had. Environmental impact, again, this is something we wanted to kind of work out right from the start, because this did seem like, to me, a great opportunity to look at how we'd made a difference. A million kilograms of CO2 is what was calculated to be saved. The difference between how the old devices operate and then the new ones has saved us those 57,000 kilowatts and 50,000 miles of travelling, which I'm sure you all will agree is a great end result for something that traditional as swapping out devices in a local government environment. And I think it's a thing to think about for everyone, to say, can we do the same? We've all got hub sites or libraries or local offices that we could use to do that, and this technology does work. It's not bleeding edge. Autopilot, Intune, pre-provisioning is all kind of technologies that's there and available and can work for everyone. So this is an opportunity for all of us to make an impact by utilizing this technology and thinking differently about how we do something as standard as a device refresh. Technology, so obviously I've touched on that we use Windows Autopilot. We also used Intune and enrolled those devices, and again that was a big game changer in that we then knew where those devices were. They were on our asset register as soon as they were pre-provisioned. We weren't waiting on a spreadsheet from a supplier of what had been delivered, and loaded up those asset numbers into our service desk. This could all be done automatically. So again, reduced the overhead for some of my staff and made it a lot more real time as to knowing where those devices were. As I said, they'd sent direct to the user. There was a lot of upfront work to get those instructions right, but in the end, I think we had a really good feedback from our staff members that this was an understandable way to set up their device, and there wasn't anything other than the delights of Somerset's rural broadband that would cause us any issues. I touched on the apps that people need, but these are all delivered by the by the company portal. So the standard apps wouldn't be loaded up first. They would have access to the ones they needed. They would download them as part of the kind of configuration of the machine when they got it out of the box. And obviously, as they had their old device, there wasn't an impact on their downtime. They could just leave that running, and then when the device was completed, they could then start to use it. So again, a simple solution that kind of worked well across all of our staff. Next, social value. Obviously, the start, as I said, the start of this project, social value was starting to really get the focus. And what I wanted to do was actually have something tangible that we could have at the end of it. We've all had examples of people planting trees for the things we bought in somewhere we'll never go or never see that tree. And I wanted to do something different. And I think this is one of the real big achievements of this project, in that we've actually got over 300 devices out into Somerset being used by people, being used by our care leavers, being used by local help groups, getting people access to a laptop who don't, and an internet that maybe they wouldn't have had, being able to kind of get an understanding of how the internet works and what they can do on it, rather than having to invest in a laptop themselves. And obviously the various refugee groups that we've had, including Diversity Voice, I've got those laptops out to the people that really need them, that have come to us with very little, and having the ability to get a laptop and maybe get online and use it was a real bonus for them. That's all I had, apart from we'll be showing the short video that was kind of produced by Mark and his team, with a bit more feedback from one of the people that received some of our laptops, plus one of our members and some of the project team. Thank you, everyone. Hi, I'm Andy Kennell. I'm the head of ICT at Somerset County Council. We came out of an outsourcing contract in 2016, and we had to do a complete refresh then of hardware. We did that very differently. It was buying 3,000 devices, leaving them in storage, then bringing them into County Hall and getting the staff members to come to County Hall to go through a process of installing their software, getting familiar with the new device. That was quite a big overhead.
So I mean, we had to work out what the budget was going to be. We had to go to tender as well. So we had to basically come up with a document that said these are our minimum requirements. You know, these are the models we want to choose. That went out to various suppliers, and Bytes came back with the winning bid. We always knew that getting old devices back was going to be the hardest part of the project. Our main way of getting devices back was to give staff a list of libraries that all around the county, and the staff members dropped their old laptop back to a library, and then we arranged collection from there.
My particular interest is climate change, and I support the climate change lead, Councillor Sarah Dyke. Under this new system, we've been posting devices out to staff. That has actually saved 45,000 miles of travel. It's also reduced our need for IT staff to support those staff and councillors. So it's been a win-win, really. That reduction of travel is a key gain. What happens to the devices when we no longer use them? That's a major thing in terms of carbon and kind of waste as well. There are a whole host of organisations where we have given out laptops, so things like the YMCA, Caris Refugees, children learning English in schools. I think this is a really good example of the way our everyday practices, things that we just took for granted in the way we would do it in the most cost-efficient way, probably back in the day, is turning into something where we are much, much more mindful of A, social value, and B, carbon impact and the environment.
We really needed help, and I put an appeal out on Facebook, and then that led to us having the very kind donation of the laptops. I think we received 10 of them. So that's been, for us, yes, we're a small organisation, but and it's a relatively small number, but, those 10 laptops for us were, worth their weight in gold, really.
At Bytes, we are carbon neutral. It's not just something we believe in, but it's the way we do our business. As one of Microsoft's key partners, we're constantly evolving our in-house skills around the latest Microsoft technologies, and one of those is the Intune or Autopilot. It sits on top of Intune, or the white glove service, as they called it. So while we were expanding that in our portfolio, it was at the same time that Andy and Somerset County Council were looking at how were they going to do their device refresh and what tools in the market were available, as well as what devices. And so it just seemed like a natural fit, having what was coming out from Microsoft versus what was needed by the customer.
We all kind of look at social value in our procurements to try and find out how can we make better use or get advantages for our communities out of our procurement. And it's often very difficult to find a tangible benefit that will actually help your local community. Well, this is a really good example of how actual local people are receiving benefit as part of this procurement. So that social value, rather than being potentially someone planted a tree somewhere, this is actually a device that's going out to the local community that people are making use of, that people could say, actually we've received something, rather than something that's kind of a bit of paper or a theory.
Andy, thanks for that. And
Okay.
take pride in that video. So we've had a couple of questions and comments coming in. And if I've got you for a few minutes before I move on to the next part of our session, where I'll be facilitating our panelist discussion. But a question came in with regards to the carbon savings. Are they simply being transferred from the office to an alternative place of work, i.e. now the home?
I think the calculation was on the cost of the project, not on the ongoing cost of running those devices. So it was the savings around the reduction in miles and the difference between those devices when they're being used. It's a difficult one, isn't it, to try and quantify some of this stuff. So that's why we kind of kept it to the impact of the project rather than the long-term impact. So it was just a way of showing how we'd done things differently, and it had less of an impact on the environment to roll out the similar size of devices.
Okay. We had a question as well from a delegate saying that they've just passed their climate change emergency motion at the council and would love to learn any steps that you've taken or working group policies that you've implemented to align what you're doing with the climate change emergency policy.
Okay, we can do that. I've got Councillor Helena's details, so we can probably catch up outside of this. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent. Well, Andy, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us. So moving on, I'm going to now facilitate our panelist discussion. So hopefully I'll invite to the stage quite a few of our panelists now. We've got Georgina from Tech UK, Richard and Dan from Bytes, Nimesh and Gareth from Microsoft. It's getting a bit crowded. And Andy's colleague Jack at Somerset. So great to have you all with us. And let's start. So we've had some questions and comments come in. I've written some of my own notes, so I'm going to get started with a question I had. But to our delegates and audience, feel free to keep the comments and questions coming in. We do have a place in the session now to try and cover off everything, concerns or things. I know there was a question about Autopilot, which I'll come to our speakers at Microsoft about later on. But I'm going to start with the fact that many councils have acknowledged that they've underinvested over an extended period of time in digital skills, and just made assumptions that people coming to the organisation have a certain level of skill. One-to-one sessions with everybody as you roll out new technologies can be slow and expensive and a drain on resources. And how beneficial is it to coach your council's technology champions in order to drive adoption, improve and optimize and improve frontline productivity? Dan, I'm going to come to you on that question, if I may.
Yeah, certainly, Mark. Thanks for that question. Great one. For me, this is probably more around having a coherent and detailed adoption and change management plan for digital transformation. And to echo, I think what Martin was saying in his keynote at the start of this masterclass, is making sure that you really have a good understanding of what you're trying to achieve as throughout any given procurement or digital transformation agenda, and really thinking about how your users how you want your users to interact with this new technology, and equally, what is your user demographic? You mentioned there that I think there's been assumption across all the public sector, and indeed I would argue corporate sector, that people coming into the business have a inherent skill set, and that's not always the case. So I think largely what I'm saying is it's really important that you have a full adoption and change management plan. I would encourage you to be really clear with users up front about what is changing and why, and be clear and explicit on, why that change is important to them and what they can expect, but also what's expected of them. How do you want them to learn and obtain a new skill set? And naturally, as part of that conversation, you want to be considering how you're going to deliver this training. And I think this speaks to your question, Mark. Are you doing this through one-on-one sessions? I think you're right. That's largely expensive and slow to roll out. Most organizations now looking at, and I'm trying to avoid the jargon, sort of learning management platforms or LMS solutions, and delivering content, whether that's ready-made content, which Microsoft has some fantastic stuff around, or indeed, generating bespoke content for the particular scenario that you're dealing with. The key takeaway for me there is make it relevant to the individual, make it relevant to their role. And make it easy to access, integrate it with technologies like Teams so it's easy for them. And to finish my long-winded answer, Mark, and around champions specifically, that really speaks to having a support network around these users as you go through these programs. And therefore, you're absolutely right. Having knowledgeable and passionate technology champions around the business to support users on a day-to-day basis as you go through this change is hugely important. And I think my final point would be, don't think that adoption as change management is project-based. You will have staff turnover, you will have new people grow into your business. And so it's a continual journey that you need to take your users on. So that needs to feed in as well.
Yeah. Jack, I'm going to come to you, if I may. At Somerset, same question. How beneficial was it in coaching your council's technology champions to drive adoption, optimization, and improve frontline productivity? And Peter's mentioned a great comment there, was digital literacy factored into the business case to get those best possible outcomes?
Yeah, so technology champions, investing time and resource and money into new technology is one thing, but encouraging people to adopt the new technology and the change is another big challenge. So while our rollout reduced costs and resulted in some really good feedback, we did have to drive that change, and we used our technology champions for that. So they were instrumental in all stages, from trialing the technology to begin with, and to helping their colleagues set up the devices later on as well. And without them, it would have been really difficult. But this is where it's really important to sort of, it's not just about the technology and the devices, it's about the people as well, and sort of supporting them every step of the way. We had to make sure that the deployment sort of method with Autopilot was quick, easy, and it wouldn't sort of incur stress on anybody, because at the end of the day, we're replacing a sort of one-to-one approach with an automated approach with nobody to help them. So it had to be easy, and we had to put the people at the front of everything. We couldn't just leave them to it without any support. And in a time where most of the country were working from home, it meant people wouldn't have to travel and put themselves at risk, while simultaneously we were replacing their device as well to make sure they're productive.
That's great. I've seen some questions, as I said earlier on, about, I suppose, going further, let's explain what Autopilot is. And now one from David asking about Intune. Gareth, do you want to quickly pick that up? Is that something that you can give a full and frank explanation in terms of the Autopilot and Intune?
Yeah, so essentially how and this seems odd saying it as a Microsoft employee, but how I imagine it is if you are an owner of an iPhone, and you pick up your iPhone, you change iPhones, and then suddenly you turn it on, and then it's you put your email in, and suddenly all of your applications, everything's there, and it's on your iPhone. Now, imagine that supersized for enterprise. And Autopilot basically is a collection of all of our Microsoft technologies that allow IT admins and IT departments to pre-configure new devices and get them ready for productive use. And that's kind of very simply, and you can use that on any Windows PC and even our HoloLens devices as well. When you come to then look at Intune, Intune's this little kind of unsung hero that sits within your M365 license. So as a enterprise license holder, you have access in your E3 license that gives you Intune, and Intune is essentially the endpoint manager solution. So you would have this little portal, or Jack and team would have little portal that they would go into, and they would see all of your devices in there, and it would manage things like user access, simplify app deployment and management across all of your devices. So that might be your Apple iPhone that you've got. It will manage devices and applications across that, but also more important, your kind of Surface devices, your Windows PCs.
Okay, David, hope that answered the question. I'm going to come on to Georgina. I'm going to come to you, and I want to ask. Too many good digital projects become stuck in limbo for want of a clear decision on the most appropriate procurement path for achieving enduring capability. However, as accelerator programs such as those in the MOD have proved, it is possible to test new solutions on digital and move rapidly through failure and refining stages to achieve scalable enterprise-ready solutions in a fast time frame. So do you think local government could benefit from such accelerator programs? What does Tech UK and what's your stance on that?
Definitely. Thank you, Mark. And I guess the answer is kind of twofold. One is kind of the procurement piece, and I apologize in advance. I'm a broken record when it comes to championing early market engagement. And I can go into a bit more detail about that. And I guess the other is, yes, absolutely. But to even do that, we need to have that kind of culture and environment that enables, innovation to thrive, to be agile, and to fail fast. So it's fantastic to have the opening today from Martin. There's definitely those leaders, those champions in place, and great to see as well, elected officials on this call today. So there are definitely those champions. I think to be able for those accelerator programs to be successful, I think first we need that culture and people in place to, feel empowered to do that, to be able to. And I think we are seeing some of those via Delux, the Department for Levelling Up's local digital team, from the funding there to various councils to help solve common challenges. I guess the next challenge is, how do we scale that up and actually share and signpost what that good practice is? And then the other aspect really is that early market engagement. So, colleagues across local government feeling confident that they are able to engage the market early, that they're not breaking any procurement rules. So for those of you that don't know who Tech UK are, we're the trade body for the tech industry, and we're very much the go-to for public sector if they want to engage the market early in that neutral and safe space. They are able to do that. So we see lots of engagement with central government and local government. There could definitely be more, but often sometimes what we hear is, oh no, we're not able to engage early, we're going to get in trouble. So we're definitely here to kind of de-risk that and demystify that and say that is possible. And I think why an accelerator program is great is because before it's even a procurement, and again back to Martin's point, it's understanding what's the problem you're trying to solve and what's the outcome. So having those conversations early to understand what's out there, because I guess you don't know what you don't know. So that's why accelerator programs such as that, and others that encourage those challenge-led or innovation approach to procurement is very much encouraged, and something that we do at Tech UK is via our innovators network to bring together local authorities with industry to solve common challenges. And we've looked at everything from social care, the future of care cap, and actually this week we've got something looking at how tech can be better harnessed to prevent damp and mold as well. So happy to share details of that. But yeah,
that's great. Thanks, Georgina. Richard, I'm going to come to you with a question about why do you think councils struggle when they apply traditional procurement principles when assessing and procuring digital transformation technologies? As head of public sector at Bytes, you obviously work with a vast amount of local authorities. What do you think the struggles are when they're applying those traditional procurement principles?
There's about 7 different things that pop up, in my opinion. So, the first one is that the technology landscape is always rapidly changing and evolving. So digital transformation technologies move at pace, and traditional procurement processes may not adequately account for the dynamic nature of the digital landscape. And traditional procurement policies often follow a lengthy and rigid process, which can become incompatible with the fast-paced nature of digital technology procurement. The second one is complex requirements. Digital transformation initiatives often involve complex and multifaceted requirements, and assessing and procuring technologies that meet these requirements can be challenging with the constraints of traditional procurement, which typically focuses on specifying precise technology requirements and evaluating bids based on predefined criteria. In this device as a service project we've spoken around with Somerset, some of the ways we've seen people go to market for that is they'll give you the shopping list of, we need an i5 processor, 8 gigs of RAM, and so much storage. That's not how you evaluate the best tools and the best outcome. The third one is a lack of technical expertise. Traditional procurement processes may not effectively incorporate the necessary technical expertise required for evaluating new technologies. Assessing the technical capabilities, scalability, interoperability, and the security aspects of digital solutions does require a specialized knowledge that may not be readily available within the council's procurement team. And as a result, they may struggle then to accurately assess the capabilities and compatibilities and the long-term viability of the different options. And this leads quite frequently to suboptimal procurement decisions. The fourth point is, vendor diversity and innovation. The digital transformation market is characterized by a wide range of vendors and includes startups and niche players. And traditional procurement processes tend to favor established vendors with a track record of delivering similar solutions. But that's a form of bias that can limit the opportunities for exploring innovative and emerging technologies that may offer unique benefits to the council. If Somerset had favoured the golden image preloaded on the device by the manufacturer, they would have excluded the new technologies emerging out of Microsoft and would have had a completely different result on their project. The next one is budget constraints. My local government customers have always told me that they have no money, but nowadays they tell me they really mean it. Councils these days face extreme budget constraints and financial pressure. And this pressure put onto traditional procurement processes tend to focus heavily on upfront cost, and they fail to consider the long-term value, the return on investments, and the potential cost savings that digital transformation technologies can bring. And this can lead to missed opportunities then for cost-effective and innovative solutions. The sixth one is a lack of understanding of user needs. Digital transformation technologies are essentially user-centered, and focusing on the needs of the citizens and the various stakeholders is where the priorities need to be. And traditional procurement processes may not adequately capture user requirements or allow for iterative feedback loops. And as a result, councils may procure solutions that do not effectively address the unique needs of their users and constituents. And this then leads to poor adoption and ineffective outcomes. Seventh one I scribbled down was a lack of collaboration and knowledge sharing. Local government councils often operate in silos with limited collaboration and knowledge sharing across the different authorities. And this can result in a fragmented approach to digital transformation procurement, with each council effectively then reinventing the wheel or struggling to learn from others' experiences. And without collaborative ecosystems, councils may find it challenging to access shared expertise, best practice, and successful case studies, which is why events like this today are vitally important to that. And so to address all these challenges, councils may need to adapt their procurement processes to better align with the unique characteristics of digital transformation technologies. And this could involve adapting more agile procurement methodologies, leveraging technical expertise through partnerships or external consultants, and fostering a culture of innovation and collaboration within the procurement teams. Additionally, engaging with a specialist partner such as Bytes and leveraging frameworks specifically designed for digital transformation procurement, this can all help councils to overcome these struggles and to make more informed and effective technology choices. And I'll probably have to stop there. I can speak for hours on this subject, but hopefully I've answered your question.
Very comprehensively, I must say. There was a question, Jack, I'm going to come back to you. Alan posted about what methods did you use to engage your staff to use the self-service via autopilot. Our staff don't seem to want to engage and need to be handheld even through using autopilot. How did you overcome that?
So when we first began our rollout, mid-2021, most people were working from home. So when we presented them with the option to stay at home, we'll post the device direct to their house. They can set up the device, and meanwhile they can use their old device at the same time. They sort of loved it. There wasn't really much resistance. And so as we progressed through the months, there was less and less resistance, because I think word of mouth spread. You can sit at home, you can set up your device, you don't need to come into the office, you don't need to sit with an IT engineer for 2 hours while they install your apps. So it was a mixture of the situation we were in, and a bit of word of mouth, and our technology champions as well did a brilliant job at sort of supporting people and encouraging people as well. So it was a mixture of all of those things. And it just sort of emphasized how simple it is. It's not like it used to be. You don't need to install anything yourself. You just need to log in and let autopilot and let Intune do the rest.
Okay. Nimesh, I'm going to come to you. We've talked about the from Richard and Bytes in terms of his perceived struggles in local government procurement when it comes to digital transformation. Do you recognise that a flexible approach to procurement in local authorities doesn't mean a risky approach? Georgina touched on this. Rather, it can actually result in better products, quicker solutions coming to market, smarter outcomes for all concerned?
I think so. And just taking it back and just building on what Gareth, Richard has said, look, there's a lot of comments there. What is autopilot? What is Intune? And it sort of makes me think as well. And now it sort of explains what I see in tenders. So recent tenders are just purely around the device, speeds and feeds. And I think a lot of time customers forget to link the device procurement with probably one of their biggest investments in their M365, which has all the digital transformation technology within it and needs a partner to really ignite it. And I think linking the device and the M365 together and working, I would say, at least 12 months ahead of procuring the device with partners like Bytes, working in partnership with Microsoft to pull as many of the levers you can at Microsoft to help, like we did with Somerset, with funding to get them to where they need to get to modern, help support the deployment. If we can understand early enough what the customer's trying to achieve, we can really help them, save a lot of money over time, and I think reduce that risk of having that flexibility in the procurement. Time and time again, we see a tender come out for so many devices. Like Richard said, it's all speeds and feeds. And we're getting to a world now that the M365 stack is evolving at a rapid pace and is getting complex with all the tools to give users the best user experience, with the operating system evolving, the productivity tools. You've got Copilot coming out next year. You've got Teams, which everyone uses day to day. Everyone is going to be using those technologies through the device. And I know it's always about cost and it's race to the bottom, but a lot of these times, these devices compensate on the components, and you end up getting a compatible device for M365 versus a built for, and that has a direct correlation. We have actually released recently, and we'll publish it as part of this session with IDC, total cost of ownership of a strong device, Surface as an example, along with M365, the total cost of ownership and all the soft savings. I think Somerset have really highlighted today a lot of those savings they had from the deployment, even management of the device, how you can fire up some of those technologies to automate, streamline those processes. Like Somerset's story is amazing, where they went from 20 to 3 staff. You know, we still talk to a lot of councils where they're still heavily resourced, and that conversation is never linked to the device procurement. So yeah, opening that up, hopefully, so moving away from a static procurement of just devices to more of a flexible procurement, well, I think, there is no risk, and actually you could actually leverage a lot more from that procurement.
Georgina, your, I suppose, stance on that doesn't necessarily mean it's a risky approach, being flexible. You agree?
No, and I guess, when I heard this question, I guess defining what you mean by flexible, but I was nodding away, and I think did a better job of articulating what I was trying to say earlier, both Richard and Nimesh. I guess it comes back, you don't know what you don't know. It's, through that early market engagement, you are able to understand who is out there in the market. And often what I hear from local government is the appetite to want to work with new entrants and SMEs. And often what our smaller members tell us is, if they've not had the opportunity to be part of any form of, supplier engagement, they're less likely to respond, because I think, this procurement has been done in mind maybe with the incumbent, so they have less opportunity. So I'd say it's definitely a less risky approach, both for the local authority or for the supply, because by engaging early, industry will better understand, what are your needs, what are the problems that you're trying to solve, so you'll get kind of, a better solution, more value in the long term, both for, citizen, taxpayer, the organisation and the place itself. So I would say, how can we make procurement an enabler of innovation and less of an obstacle? And I think hearing the examples today from, Somerset and Oxford definitely gives me hope that, and I feel like it's great we're having this event today, because, sharing best practice sounds so easy and common sense, but it always comes up at any roundtable or an event I do. How can we do more of it? So it would be great to showcase and actually to show what is possible when you do your procurement differently and actually, engage the market well and meaningfully.
Okay. So Gareth, I'm going to come to you that, councils are encouraged as a first step, like Georgina just talked about, to try and consult with key stakeholders, the supply market, even their customer and user base, to reach a common understanding of things like social value and what that might look like as part of their digital transformation contract. Do you feel that happens in practice, or much more needs to be done?
Yeah, I'd probably go with the latter there, Mark, if I'm being completely honest. Probably a lot more needs to be done. I know, central gov departments have these guidelines around 10%. Not all local and regional governments need to kind of adhere to that. But with that being said, social value takes on many, many different forms. At Microsoft, we kind of put everything in pillars, and we kind of have 4 pillars around our social value and what we do. But really, it's about understanding and how we can engage with customers and understanding what their social value priorities are. We would list our social values as inclusive economic growth. So we would run a lot of digital skilling initiatives, like we've done with the DWP. That might be small business growth. I mean, I had firsthand experience with this last year when we looked at sustainability and small business and how we can drive those 2 agendas together. But we kind of then look at climate recovery, well-being, diversity and inclusion, but really without engaging with stakeholders, without understanding what their common goals are, we can't align. And when we align, then that's when the kind of great outcomes occur. So yes, absolutely, first step must be engage, whether it's partners that you're currently using, but also to what Nimesh was saying there around, joining the dots. When you go out for a hardware procurement, or you're going out to buy new cars, or you're going out to buy some infrastructure, or whatever it might be, joining the dots of what are your social value goals as an organization, and how can we incorporate this into this procurement exercise. And it's often something that I'm talking to procurement teams at local and regional governments about, in terms of it's not just about the device that you're buying, it's about everything that goes with it and the value that you can eke out of that procurement exercise.
So I'm going to come back to a point, and Dan, I'm going to come to you based on a comment earlier on in terms of users and the different user demographics, about how that relates to the experience of new tech. Is that something, a comment came in that you want to touch on?
Yeah, no, happy to touch on that, Mark. And I think it's a really strong point. And I think we need to recognise that in councils and local government entities, there's a wide range of users, whether we look at age or really IT literacy. So when we're particularly talking about device as a service, autopilot, Intune, which has been the subject of today's conversation, really this question is centered around what is the experience of the end user, and how easy it is for them to interact with it, and do they get the experience that we want, stroke, need them to have. For me, when I'm talking one-to-one with customers around device as a service, it is primarily centered around the user experience, employee retention, making them feel valued. And I think the point that was probably coming across was, if we have a particular demographic of user who struggles to interact with technology, that would turn them off and provide a poor experience. So it's about how do we look at each of those scenarios and provide the experience. So even if you think about how they receive devices, is there a quick and easy guide inside the box, a slip sheet that says this is how you use it? I've got one customer, not public sector, who's putting a nice tea bag inside it to enhance the experience they get. So it's about making sure that the training, and I'm going to come back to my adoption and change management conversation that we had earlier, Mark, and that the usability of that solution covers the user base that you have and its demographic. But it's such an important point, because if you get that wrong and you turn users off, you're going to cause yourself problems. So making sure you're aware of who your users are, what their literacy is in the IT space, and how you're going to involve them and expect them to engage with the technology is super important.
Jack, Mark has asked a good question. How did the project compare costs of BAU versus the external option? Jack, is that something maybe that you can...
Oh, yeah, so sorry. So it was detailed a little bit in Andy's presentation earlier, but when we compared our last device refresh 5 years ago with the one we just completed, there was quite a monumental difference. So we reduced our staff needed to roll out these devices from 20 to 3. So that was about almost £600,000 in savings. And then, of course, as well, we've got the energy savings. We've got the various deals that we leveraged throughout the year, because we didn't buy all of the devices at one time. So there's a mixture of factors, but it was in the slides. So if the slides are shared at the end, maybe have a look through there, but it's detailed there.
Okay, well, keep your questions coming in. We've got, I suppose, about another 10 minutes. I've got one more that I jotted down, and Gareth, actually, you touched on it. Central government departments and agencies must evaluate social value with a minimum overall weighting of 10% for the total procurement. For all other public sector bodies, this is discretionary and can vary significantly. Should there, do you think, be a mandate for councils to go further than 10% for digital contracts, especially when we've heard the likes of Somerset's success? Gareth, you touched on this earlier. Maybe come back to you first.
Yeah, no, I think my short answer would be yes, to put it simply. But I think yes, with some accountabilities. What I often see in the procurement process is that it might list, what are you going to do for social value in the local community, or what are you going to do here? That seems too generalist for me. You know, even if they're going to go 10%, it's something like, you know, our goal is to include, you know, be more inclusive around, you know, small businesses and so on and so forth, or reduce our CO2 when it comes to a hardware procurement, or, you know, whatever it might be, but actually name and shame it, for want of a better word. Actually say what you're trying to achieve and how then a partner is going to be brought on board to support that and provide the solution. If it's linked to the council's goals, if your goal as an organisation is to reduce your scope 1 and scope 2 in sustainability, for instance, your direct and indirect emissions, then label that as part of your social value construct, and that's what you want to do. If it's to drive, you know, young apprenticeships or use technology to facilitate that, yes, drive it. And what we'll probably see is it ekes up more than 10%, you know, 10, 20, 30%. But we have to be realistic that we're always going to have budget constraints, pricing conversations, but understanding that what place that value of that device, in this instance for Somerset, places on the overall project is really important. And not just understanding that you're buying the same devices you previously bought and you're getting it cheaper. That's great. Well, it is. But as Nimish says, you're also getting a device that might be compatible rather than the best expression of your investments in Microsoft technology, for instance. So it's really, really kind of important to kind of put that into perspective. But I would like to see more links to organizations' goals. You know, if you're going out for a device procurement, what are you trying to do? What I love about what Somerset did is they were trying to streamline deployment. They were trying to, you know, leverage the investment that they had made in their Microsoft license agreement and then bring that out so that it's singing, so that then the users get the best experience. To Dan's point, you know, the users are then seeing what the technology investments are driving for their workforce. That increases retention, increases the great experience that the end users have, you know, and so on. It just makes things simple. So if using the technology to drive the outcomes is a better conversation than using a price to drive a budget constraint. What is it that you're trying to achieve? How can Microsoft support you? How can Bytes support you? And how can other councils support you? You know, the work that Somerset have done. I could name a few more that I've worked with that have done exactly the same. And so there are plenty of examples out there to kind of drive that.
Richard, I could see you nodding with Gareth there. Have you got any of those examples?
I've got probably a bad example.
Right.
But
Okay.
Just to highlight the change. So there needs to be a new way of driving social value, particularly when you're looking at procurement and through tender. We recently responded to a tender with a different county council, not Somerset, where they were looking for a cloud backup and disaster recovery solution, which what they wanted was this immutable backup that would be delivered by a fully automated tool, so software as a service. But 20% of the weighting was for social value, and the most of the scores in that social value question seemed to be copied and pasted out of a school's dinner tender, because they were asking on how many local residents we were going to employ to deliver this automated cloud software as a service that runs in the cloud. It's completely disconnected from the one to the other. And similarly, we had a London Borough who ran a tender exercise where they mandated that 10% of the value of the tender needed to be delivered into social value. And they had hired a hall, and they were going to be helping people with CVs and increasing their employability. And despite having, you know, the sufficient number of people subscribed to the service on the day, nobody turned up. So it was a lot of money that could have been spent in other places rather than wasted. So something needs to be done. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm excited to see the evolution, and hopefully it arrives soon on how best to score and look at social value in a tender. And I guess the answer is pre-market engagement, isn't it, Georgina?
Yeah, and Richard, I was just about to say that absolutely that early engagement, understanding what your goals are of an organization, and then linking the technology that you're purchasing to potential outcomes that you can drive by it, not a copy and paste saying, you know, you're buying technology, you know, that's a device, for instance, but you now want local people employed in Somerset, for instance. That's fine by me because I live in Somerset, hence why I'm red now and it's sunny. But it's just kind of it make it specific to what you're trying to achieve rather than just a generic kind of, oh, I've been given these guidelines to do something.
Jack, come to you with that same question. Should there be a mandate for councils to go further than 10%, as long as they get the social value description right and they're asking for the right things?
I think so, yeah. I mean, when we began our journey, we sort of had a commitment to reuse as many as possible, and we've done that before as well, and this isn't the first time. But the thing is, from our perspective, unfortunately, not everybody's lucky enough to have their own laptop. And when we've donated some to care leavers, they've gone on to create CVs, and as Richard said, increase their employability skills, secure jobs. We've given some to refugees who are able to video call their families from thousands of miles away. You don't really realise, I don't think, what a laptop can do until you've been in a position where you've given some away to these people that really do need them. They're just two examples, and at first you wouldn't think a laptop could make such an impact, but our experiences have proved otherwise. So I think so. I think everybody should do their utmost to sort of reuse and do what they can to support, especially the local communities, for local governments.
Definitely huge scope for innovation in this area. You know, from what Andy was saying, you didn't just want to go down that route of, all right, we've planted X amount of trees, never see said trees. All right, the climate action emergency plan's great, but real social value benefits that you're able to deliver to your citizens, I think is what should be focused on as part of those procurement exercises. Is there any other questions, comments from our audience? I've got a couple of minutes before I'm going to say thank you to our panelists. So please do get those in. We've got a couple more minutes with our panelists. In the meantime, whilst you're typing those out, anything in particular our panelists want to say that delegates should go away with today as a key consideration, a key learning? Don't all rush at once. Dan, what would you say would be a good outcome for one of our listeners today?
I'll pick up. I'll go first. For me, you know, I'm hugely passionate about employee experience, and my current quote is, you know, retention is the new recruitment. I'm going to link this to how difficult it is. All sectors are facing it in recruitment, finding the right staff. So one of the things that we haven't necessarily pointed out today is that providing that fantastic experience, and Gareth, you touched on this, to end users really does help with that retention. It can help reduce recruitment costs. It can increase their productivity. And I know it's very difficult to measure. Sometimes that can be intangible. But for me, when we're thinking specifically about device as a service, yes, obviously finding good bang for buck in terms of the commercials behind it, but let's also think about the tertiary benefits around user experience and employee retention.
Okay, Georgina.
Yeah, surprise, it's not going to be early market engagement, the first one. It would be, yeah, don't work in silos. I think really I would say to, you know, the leaders on the call, where it's kind of the CEOs or the elected officials, you know, be that champion. And then I guess for the digital lead, you know, bring others on that journey. So, you know, bring together the heads of services, procurement, you know, IT doesn't no longer just sit with, you know, that person that has IT or digital in their title. I think COVID very much illustrated that, where we all worked kind of virtually and digitally, and also showed actually how technology can help, you know, transform what we are doing. So, you know, bring everyone on that journey, and hopefully that journey includes that early market engagement. Don't be afraid to do that. I appreciate, you know, those on this call are busy firefighting. There's so many, you know, priorities. It's hard to know what to prioritize, but I would say innovation should definitely be one of those, and that can be achieved through better procurement, early market engagement. So that long term, both for the, you know, for the services, the organization, but, you know, for the renewal of the place as well. So I just say, please make time to invest in that and do that right. And obviously TechUK is happy to support in any of that.
I've just had a message that Andy's still around. I didn't even know this. So Andy, I'm going to bring you back on, because I think here you are. Hello again.
Thanks, Mark. It was
What
just
have you got to add?
yeah, just around that stakeholder engagement. It's also, from our perspective, it's good to understand that suppliers are stakeholders as well. And one of the things that I try to do on this project is to understand what they're trying to sell and how that aligns with what I'm trying to achieve and how we can match up. And we talked about joining the dots up, but joining the dots up with Bytes and Microsoft and whoever you're going to be buying the laptops from to say, actually, that we've got aligned goals, and maybe talk to our stakeholders to say, how can we align councillors or fellow teams' goals of what they're trying to achieve over the next year with what Bytes and Microsoft are trying to sell us. And that's not to say just to accept it, because that's what they're trying to sell. But you do have to join up those two things and try and get something that achieves for both sides.
Okay. A couple of comments come in. Our audience is very mixed today. You know, we've got elected members, we've got senior management in councils. So I know we've had a number of questions coming in from the councillors and elected members side. So I'm going to pick up on one of those, which was from Janet. A comment when the councillors, they were issued offered to buy a tablet. They saved the council money. And they took a lay payment from wages without interest. Nimesh, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we are seeing a huge trend. And 2-3 years back, there was people carrying around multiple devices. They still are, to be honest. They have a tablet, a device, and a smartphone. We did see a trend of consolidation of a tablet and a laptop into which is the Surface Pro 9, and we've seen a huge trend in that. We've seen some councils that have adopted it statewide. We have one council that's going to refresh again all tablets. What we have learned is that if you want to consolidate a device, a laptop and like an iPad or an Android tablet style device into one, it's worth the primary laptop being primary as a tablet first. We do see a lot of 2-in-1s coming into the market, which are convertible. And we do see some negativity in that because they're heavy in device. So when you're using them in a tablet form and you're used to your thin iPad or Android device, you don't get the same experience. So we are seeing that trend to detachables where you want to consolidate, but there is this argument, should we buy a convertible versus a true detachable? Because a convertible can give you a better laptop experience. But then there is a strong correlation that if you want to have tablet first, for example, if that question was from a councillor, which would particularly in that persona be tablet first, then inking would be important to that user. So a Pro 9 device would be better than a convertible style product, which are quite heavy when converted around. I hope that answers the question. Did that answer it? So we are seeing a trend, but it's a mixed trend out there. We saw it initially, but it has quite slowed down. Some people just want a really good lightweight device with a touch screen and all the tools to sort of light up all their productivity tools in M365, like Office, Teams, etc.
I can kind of add quickly to that, Mark, if it's okay. I think great initiative for users to choose their own devices, get a device that they want. Clearly taking it out of your pay. To your point, Liz, is absolutely. I think when you look at, say, you were to bring in social value in this and carbon reduction of devices, how do you move at scale to do that when everyone's buying different devices with different product carbon footprints, and how as a council do you then report on that? So often what I see is that you can get the product carbon footprint of most devices. So what does that look like before the device gets to you? If you're as an organization are trying to reduce your scope 3, which is your supply chain kind of downstream usage, what does that look like? Well, you need the product carbon footprint of the devices that you're buying. And at scale, if everyone's buying their own devices, how do you then bring that into a reporting mechanism that might align to some of the council's goals? So that's always the challenge there, is that, yes, it's great to choose your own device. Yes, you get one. Yes, you can take it out of your pay. But how do you drive the market to some of the points raised earlier? How do you drive market incentives to produce better environmentally friendly devices? We can do that by driving scale and scale purchases. and moving towards a certain model of device that is more environmentally friendly.
Okay. So Louise talks about how she wishes their council would move towards Surface Pros, finds them very useful, used them at her previous authority, excellent personal use. Again, go back to Dan's, all about the experience side. I'm conscious of time. So Jack, there was obviously a chat going on in terms of consolidation. I know Somerset have done some work in device consolidation in particular. So is that something that you'll be able to share?
Yeah, just to give an example, really, we did a little bit of work in device consolidation with Microsoft. We had a team that had 3 devices. Each individual had 3 devices each, so a phone, a tablet, and a laptop. So when it came to refresh some of these devices, we thought, well, why are they carrying around 3 devices everywhere they go? Is there anything we can do to consolidate a couple of these down, in particular the tablet and the laptop, into one device? And that's exactly what we did with the Surface Go 3, which is the smaller version of the Surface Pro, and they absolutely love it, and it's done wonders. It means they don't have to carry around 3 devices. The Surface Go does everything their laptop needed to do, does everything the tablet needed to do, and it runs Windows, which means it can be managed by our endpoint manager, Intune, and it can be deployed with Autopilot, which we touched upon earlier. So that's just an example of how we touched upon that area.
Oh, great example. Well, I think that's all we've got time for in our panelist debate today. But to each of our contributors, thank you very much for joining me. Thanks for sharing, and yeah, it's been a real pleasure hosting this session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, for the final 10 minutes or so, I'm now going to invite Richard Dooner to join the stage. Richard is a program manager and WLGA lead, but also very much a procurement and social value expert. And delighted to have Richard join us for our closing keynote of today's session. So, yeah, Richard, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Hello, my name is Richard Dooner. That's Dooner with 2 O's. You spell it like you say it. Hope you enjoyed today's local government masterclass and took from it valuable lessons to apply in your place, in your role. My speciality is procurement. I'm particularly interested in the application of social value, or as I think of it, doing procurement better by doing all of the procurement, and not just the easy bits like letting a contract, which isn't easy at all, especially in the highly regulated environment for councils where the rules are complex and the risk of challenge is ever present, as is the risk of not obtaining all the outcomes you need to achieve. And I suggest that the second of those is the greater risk, but not all would agree. I guess it depends on how many challenges and how serious they are. The trick with contracting is to know what you're doing and to do it right. But contracting is not the entirety of procurement, at least not to me. And obtaining the outcomes you need to achieve does not start with a tender notice, nor stop at contract award. There's an important bit which happens before you get into the contracting phase, where you make your modal choices, and choice there must be. Not blindly going down the same route as last time without at least considering whether there's now a better way, where you make clear what you intend to do, who you need to involve, and why exactly you're doing this thing in the first place. That last bit is important because it can look different to different people with different motivations. It's also a question to keep asking because things always change. So there's an important bit in thinking about the mode, the relationship, the selection. Then the operational contract delivery, a management process that ensures you get what you set out for and also ensures that it remains relevant over time. The trick there is to ensure that all the procurement is being done, that it's being done the right way, that the procurement realises all the value, not just the value in an individual budget holder expressed in terms of nominal savings, but value in terms of the organisation's purpose, its policies, and the ongoing contribution of the provider to its work. We heard earlier from Martin Reeves. Now, Martin articulates the understanding in public leadership that we can do much more than simply spend the money and buy stuff. Strategic shopping is not good enough. We can do more, and we have the means, and there's plenty of good practice to draw from. We have new legislation on the way, including a new Procurement Act, which is intended to help public institutions do procurement better. Now, whether we take advantage of this new legislation or not is largely up to us, but the expectation is there. And if we don't change what we do, we won't change what we get. We also heard from Andy Kennell, a local government officer who has introduced an innovative programme for hardware refresh at Somerset Council. The method is game-changing. It looks particularly well executed, but there's nothing unusual in what this officer was asked to do. In fact, the business need, the requirement for periodic replacement of physical resources that require updating over time is remarkably common and by no means limited to ICT. Organizations do it all the time. And there are well-established methods by which these things have been done. Kit gets old, buy new kit. Chuck old kit because it's no use to us. Or perhaps it doesn't get chucked. Maybe it gets put in a corner somewhere. Maybe in a large organization and a unitary authority formed in April 2023, comprising a former county council and 4 district councils, serving a population of 57,600 people, is a large organization with a sizable legacy to manage. You might return it to the center, where it goes into a room with all the other unwanted mismatched bits of kit that were collected over the years until the pile gets big enough to fill a skip. Either way, it's junk now, and there are better ways to use a corner. This example was for IT, but it could have been anything really. Somehow, all residual equipment has to be managed, and there's no real harm if we replace old for new, right? No, not right. Not right at all. And if we take time to think about it, much harm. There's evidently a money-saving opportunity to the council that is lost if not taken in potential reuse and repurpose in-house, or to the community where the council has a duty of community well-being and where digital inclusion is a real and present challenge, or to a partner in public service who might not be under, or might be under different management and different budgets, but who serves the same tax-paying public as we do. We might think that equipment we finish with is uneconomic to reuse, with perhaps risk in the legacy. But what if we fail? What if we fail to protect confidential data? Or what if there's an electrical fault? But as we heard today, there is room to think again. We do have the collective capability to mitigate those risks and perhaps remove them altogether, perhaps by taking a different approach, like the one that Andy's team has ably demonstrated today. There's a cost to our society of waste, all waste. IT hardware is horrendous to the environment when it's dumped, or if exported to places where materials are reclaimed by exploitative and dirty means, a just out of sight global tragedy that needs to be stopped right now. In reality, there's going to be cost and inefficiency in all sorts of places, with unnecessary consumption of scarce resources and carbon dioxide production that need not occur. These things we know. We've never been more aware. We were reminded today. We can apply our minds, our experience, and the knowledge we gain from people we trust to find a better way. It's the right thing to do. It's also what our citizens require us to do. And it's not just me saying that. I am, as an officer of my local government association, referring to the policy choices of council leaders. which apply here as they do where I'm from. Councils, thankfully, are locally democratic, responsible, accountable. The councillors we elected have made policies that protect communities both here and abroad, policies for the present and for future generations. Council leaders and parliamentarians can be politically different, but our leadership's collective requirement is that their organisations be efficient and globally responsible and provide more than simple value for money by also supporting the objectives of the organisations when they procure. Leaders understand that the £300 billion spent every year by public institutions through procurement, that's 1 in 3 of every pound of public money, buys a lot of influence, which is there to be deployed, and deployed to much wider purpose than the immediate task of making compliant contracts through competitive process. And frankly, if that's all you're doing, colleagues, you're not doing your whole job. Maybe that's because of cuts. If you're firefighting all the time, you can do no more than drown slowly in the massive weight of stuff that's thrown at you every day. You have my sympathy. I understand. But if it's going to change, you have to make the bit you aren't doing relevant, real, and to your bosses worth having. An essential part of the delivery of services. We can start with the missions and policies of our own organisations within our own communities. We can also go to the wider provisions of the government, like the Social Value Act, or where I come from, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which is harder to say and harder to do, but has to be done. It's not optional. And if the policy appears not to be happening, is that leadership's fault or ours? Realist view. Not everybody needs to be an innovator all the time. Some of the things we do now are good. They work well or well enough, but with time and over many challenges, we do learn that there are better ways to do things, not least by using better ICT and better data to simplify processes and provide a better understanding of where limited resources need to focus. We have the systems. Now, you've heard about some of them today, deployed too. We must know that it's no longer good enough to do things the way they've always been done when there's evidently a better way. And we've heard a great example here about how to think differently about how a council can respond to an otherwise routine business need to deliver a series of benefits that are worth having and which otherwise would not have been realized. So thank you for listening to this session and to the earlier masterclass. I hope you paid attention and listened well. All is there to be taken, and it's for you to assess, learn, and if it suits you, apply. And when you do this for yourselves, you'll add your unique knowledge and experience to the challenge, and then find that perhaps you did it just as well, only better, because it's you. But maybe that's how collective learning works. If you can, try to be generous, as our Somerset colleagues were generous today. Play the good bits back so the likes of us can see it, and maybe in the process we'll help each other. So now I'm going to hand you back to Mark for the close. Many thanks for listening. May I wish you well in whatever part of the country you happen to be. Thanks and goodbye.
Thank you, Richard, for those closing remarks. And I trust today has been insightful on behalf of my team at GovNews and our partners at Bytes and Microsoft. Thank you for joining today's session and local government masterclass. We've recorded today's event, so we'll send that to you. We'll send over Somerset's PowerPoint presentation as well, so you've got those slides. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you real soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.